Here we are at Little Sirius Cove. It's not far from the city, which is really marvellous. You would think you're a million miles from anywhere. Gonna have to watch the sunlight today, so I'll have to get those big shapes in, the darks in. I love how it's low tide today. That'll help me with the rocks in the foreground, being able to use those for my composition. I think it's off to my twin brother up at the easel. Got my trusty size 12 hog hair, and I think I'll start to spread some paint. I think when you're working outdoors, one little benefit can be is if you do know the subject or are familiar with the subject, it kind of helps you with the planning, the possibilities of what might go right or wrong. So first I'll get in is that big shape of the Mossman, not sure if it's Mossman Point, but that is Mossman Bay just around the corner from us. But I do love the little boathouses. That'll be my focal point in that area that I'm working in the moment. And ultimately, all they are really just rectangles. So we get the shape in first, and then we start to look for local colour and values after that. Notice that I'm using the big brush. Even on a small board, we still want to cover that board as quickly as possible. There's nothing like sort of being able to blast in those big areas. Really start to get some action going. That's lean medium that I'm just dipping into just on my right hand side there. I find it's one of the best or the better mediums possible that you can buy, and I've been using it for over 30 years now, so if I found a better one I would have used it. So now we're coming in with the foliage, and we've got to be careful that I don't chase all of those greens. And you notice that I'm just rolling that brush as well. That helps to mimic the feeling of how foliage grows. Now I've just got a sharper edged brush. This is actually the little Neef. It's a little stiff synthetic. I've never really used the stiff synthetics that much with my oil painting, but in the last year or two I've found them to be really marvellous brushes, especially when you're going into wet areas. A lot of times even a hog hair brush can just feel a little dull and doesn't get that nice clean sharp edge that the stiff synthetic would. So I've got that main shape in there. You can see how it just locks in the composition. And typically when we're working outside, we're at the mercy of noise, wind. Even we've had some kids sort of around, and sometimes that's enough to just the chattering away can, even though they're just kids and they're playing, but all the little distractions. And probably the overriding one for me, because I do love the strong sunlight, is will the sunlight drop on me, which it normally will, but it's just a matter of how long. And that's, I think, one of the great benefits of working outside, is that it teaches us to edit, teaches us to mostly and only get visually what's most important for the story, the narrative that we're aiming to tell. So I'm just getting the reflections in, and the golden rule for reflections, especially with still water, is that it'll be one value darker than the object being reflected. Quite a clever little approach. I didn't think of it. It was actually told to me when I was a young student, and it's great to get some of those good strong bits of advice, because it just then helps you analyse what's happening. So the distant shape is Cremorne Point. It's a very paintable little shape, actually, because it's got a lot of sandstone. Sandstone holds the light nicely, And I'd normally be using quite a bit of yellow ochre in this mix. To go darker, just a little bit of, normally a little bit of ultra blue, but now I'm getting back into the foliage in the front. And I guess the way that things work is that we have to plan ahead for things, light going, and that's where I do like to sort of put the sky in later, but have planned for it well before. So now that I'm getting the sky in, it's probably not a bad moment just to step back and soon sort of just get a overall view of how it's going. Okay, so now we're with the Eclipse brush. Just had to remember the name that it was. I only use a few brushes, but normally the black handle brushes are Roseberry & Co. and the red handle brush. The big brush is my Hog Hair, which is an Art Spectrum brush. It's mostly only available here in Australia. There's a few other good brushes around the world, the Hog Hairs to use and get. But I do consider myself a square brush painter. I sometimes will use a little filbert just to do some of the drawing in, or sometimes they're great for a bit of foliage as well. So we're starting to get to the business end of the painting now. And that's where, even though you can't see me stepping back, but I think the start and the end really are super important, because we're seeing if we've got any big major problem, or sometimes we can overwork it. So that's why the stepping back, even though when I'm painting by myself, I'm doing it all the time. And there's no sort of real measurement, different subject, different amount of times, but I'm not a big fan of squinting down at the painting, because it's already an edited version of the original scene. So I'll squint down at the scene just to reduce the visual information, just so I know what's happening. So we're starting to get to the real fun part. I normally know when I bring out the little liner brush that it's getting time to wrap things up. To get good at these sort of little marks, you can practice on just a piece of paper or just something, because it's more about the amount of medium that I'm using, even though I do like to sort of support my hand there. Other artists have different techniques, but I find that one really works well for me. So this has been a really great little painting, excellent little subject, cannot ask for any more, and I'm really thrilled to be able to actually get this one on record. Didn't quite get as much sunlight as I would have liked, but that's where sort of memory and it is a scene that I have painted before, so that always sort of helps, but never on site, so that's always a great little adventure. There was actually quite a few little aspects that I'd never actually seen before. There was sort of some of the rock face here, and there's a little bit more depth there. And that's always the problem with photographic reference. It does tend to flatten things out. But I felt it was a really great little morning. So I think it's time to sort of wash the brushes and head on home.